Sportageous. Sport gets smarter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sportageous videocast, where we bring you insightful, smart, and in-depth conversations with sports professionals from all walks of life. I'm your host, Zushan Hashmi, and our guest today is Sean Martin. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you, Zushan. Happy to be here.
Well, Sean is the founder of Fairbreak Global, an organization that strives for equality in sports, media, business, and more, with a focus on cricket in particular. Sean, I wanted to start off the conversation with talking about Fairbreak. Of course, Fairbreak needs no introduction, but let's go back a bit in time and tell me a little bit about the reasoning behind why you founded the organization when you did.
Well, Fairbreak grew out of what was originally called WICL back in 2013. After the World Cup, and it became evident that we needed to work a lot more to improve both the pay and conditions of female players, female cricketers. Over time, our work encompassed a lot more than just cricket. It was pretty obvious that we were working in a space around opportunity and gender equality. And the WICL concept was dropped in favour of how we rebranded as Fairbreak, the notion of, a play on the idea of a fair go and trying to figure out as much opportunity as we could, using cricket as the driver for that.
Sure. And how has it grown or perhaps changed since, you obviously kick things off?
Well, it's grown organically as much as anything through the players that we've worked with and the people that we've worked with around the world, and getting a greater understanding of their needs and their in many cases lack of opportunity. We've encompassed a lot of other principles in Fairbreak. If you're a hashtag Fairbreaker, you are someone who adheres to the principles of equality and opportunity. And we also follow, that's been brought into that, the notion of pure sport ethos, where we don't accept relationships or sponsorships from any businesses that can have an adverse effect in terms of domestic violence or family dislocation. So we won't associate ourselves with gambling or betting brands, alcohol, tobacco. That's also encompassed our CSR partner, Solar Buddy, where we work with them to help energy poverty in a lot of the countries that we work in. It's become, I suppose, something that people attach themselves to if they're interested in a diverse area, and lots of different arms to that.
Sure. So there's almost like this corporate social responsibility that is part and parcel of what you do at Fairbreak.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a cricketer to be a Fairbreaker. You just have to be someone who's interested in the principles that we adhere to.
Absolutely. But coming to the cricket, I guess, having been in the space for a significant number of years, what has it been like to obviously be a part of the positive strides that we are seeing in women's cricket as of late?
Well, personally, it's been fantastic. We've got an enormous number of incredibly inspirational players and coaches that I've had the opportunity to interact with over all that period of time. We've also got incredible people within our management team that encompasses 12 people really from around the world who work on this project most of the time pro bono. So it's an exciting thing to be a part of. And as I said, it grows organically all the time. So we've we've been happy to be a part of the development of women's cricket over this period. We're enthusiastic about what's been happening, and we'll continue to move the game forward as much as we possibly can in a spirit of collaboration with all parties.
Sure, absolutely. And I wanted to shift the direction of the conversation a little bit and ask you a bit of I don't know if it's a controversial question, but maybe something that I've seen to be an important thing to address in cricket. And I wanted to ask you for your thoughts on that. And it's basically that, when you think of cricket, there are several stereotypes and cliches that go into essentially the foundations of cricket as an institutionalized sport. So things like the gentleman's game, or sport for the dignified men, or for those of an elite class. And there have also been issues and questions around racism in sport generally, but in cricket, and particularly here in Australia, that we've seen with some of our older cricketers who represented the country, particularly from the Aboriginal community. Is this in any way a barrier to what you're achieving, or what you're trying to achieve or setting out to do at Fairbreak, or has it been so in the past?
Look, I don't think stereotypes are particularly useful usually. And although as an organisation we are aware of them, it's about sort of how much value you attach to that notion of a stereotype. Personally, I don't attach much value to it at all. It's, for us, a situation of learning, learning from all of the players that we work with, all the coaches we work with around the world. We're very open to that learning. Look, I've had comments made to me on occasions like, men are more emotionally attached to the game than women. But if you look at the history of women's cricket, looking at something that goes back, really the first recorded women's match was in 1745. So, look, it's about how much value you attach to those stereotypes. We work with such a diverse range of players and coaches from every country in the world. And that's one of the wonderful aspects of what we do. And so long as we continue to learn and create opportunities there, and then they're the things that we focus on as an organisation.
Sure. And speaking of, I guess, opportunities and, achievements and successes, what have been some of the highlights for Fairbreak in that regard, with successes and achievements within the cricketing world?
Well, I think that we've been able to create a blend of wonderful players from the major cricket nations in the world, some of the best female players in the world, and blend those with associate nation players, developing players that we've identified, and given both groups an opportunity to learn from each other. It's been interesting to see some of the great players that we've worked with, like Alex Blackwell and Sana Mir and Susie Bates, who've learnt an incredible amount from the diversity that we've brought to teams that we've invited, and then to see the learning that those associate nation players have gained from these more experienced players has also been a wonderful experience for everyone, including all the coaches and managers that have been involved as well, which is still quite a diverse group also. We've also been able to play games that bring those groups together in wonderful locations. We've played now annual events at the Getty Estate in Wormsley. We play that as an annual event every year, and I think now that we've played the first ever Bradman Women's 11 in February of this year, that is now an annual event where we play for the Blackwell Mere Cup. I think it's that, or it might be the Mere Blackwell Cup. We were always a having a debate over whose name was going to go first on that. But they're the sorts of opportunities that we continue to create. And the fact that every time we invite people to a fair break program, you're looking at always having 11 to 14 players from 10 to 12 countries participating in the one event. And that's certainly, from our perspective, something that we want to continue to do.
It's really interesting. I especially found that point on the aspects of learning going both ways. So not just from the experienced players and athletes teaching some of the younger players, but also the other way across countries and cultures and whatnot. Could you elaborate a little bit on that for me?
Yeah, I can. And without speaking for too much for those more experienced senior players, the comments that they tend to make are that they get a greater understanding of the conditions and the challenges that are confronted by a number of those associate nation players. So that's one of the learnings for that group. But they're also really inspired by the skill set of those players that they come in contact with from associate nations players. Remember, they would never play Shamila Motswayu from Botswana. They would never play Selena Solomon from Vanuatu. But they're absolutely astounded by their skill set and come very quickly to realise that it's only opportunity and game sense that separates the players. And that's been the greatest learning, I think, for those more senior players.
Sure. And that's I think really makes me sort of think about women's cricket outside of, say, for example, perhaps Australia, England, and maybe India. I could argue, and I think perhaps you're on the same page as me, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there is still a significant amount of work that needs to be done for the women's game to improve around the world. And I guess my question is, what do you think that work involves, and what do you think it needs to be to really help women's cricket grow even further outside of perhaps the countries that I touched on?
Well, funding would be number one. The second would be greater exposure to better players and better coaching and better facilities. The third thing would be more opportunity to play. So they would be the three main things that you would have to address straight away.
So very clear-cut answers. I really like that. Yeah.
Well, the talent is there. We know it's there. You know, we've seen it. We've put it on the field to play. We've been working with that talent. But the three key ingredients are, money, coaching and expertise, and opportunity to play. Because if you're not playing, you can't develop those game sense skills and game sense awareness that you need to play at that next level.
Yeah, sure. And how do you think we're both in Australia, and we recently got to witness the women's T20 World Cup live. I'm sure you did. I did too. I went to a few games in Canberra, so that was good fun. On my end too, I got to experience that as well. How do you think the successes of the World Cup that we saw have further, I guess, reaffirmed the point, and this is a point that I know Fairbreak sort of, it's essentially your vision or part of your mission, that how does it reaffirm that cricket truly is, this game that's beyond gender, race, and religion?
Well, you'd only have to look at the crowds and the online viewership to realise that the product is an excellent one, and we've known that for a long, long time. it's a significantly skillful game played by women. A little different to the way men play, but the audience is there, and people will now come and sit and watch and enjoy the skill sets of these players. You've also got a situation where you've got countries like Thailand that are now pushing the boundaries of all those other nations. And I think you'll see that even more in the future, where associate nations will put greater pressure on those more established nations because of exactly the reasons I mentioned before. The skill sets are there. The more you create opportunity and the more these other nations play, the better they will get. Overall, I think it was I would say it was a qualified success. There are over 100 nations in the world where women's cricket's played. There were 10 playing in a World Cup. So I think there's great scope there, for the future.
Yeah, sure. And of course, that was one of the very obvious successes of women's cricket in recent times. We witnessed that throughout the tournament. We witnessed that particularly in the final as well, the quality of the cricket that was played, the way the whole tournament was organized, the fans that showed up, you name it, the sort of TV coverage it got as well. Everything was essentially a success. But moving beyond that, what are some of the more recent success stories of women's cricket? I know you touched on, obviously the women's Thailand cricket team. I actually bumped into them at the Canberra airport when they were flying out from here, and they were just great. I had a chat with them and everything, and they clearly loved the game from the 10 minutes that I talked to them. But what are some of the other successes away from the World Cup that you could tell me a little bit about?
Well, if you're talking about particular countries, there's a lot that I could name. I'll pick a couple without being disrespectful to any of the other countries that are doing great work, because otherwise I could probably talk for a month here, which would send everyone to sleep. I think if you look at what's going on in Vanuatu with that program there, I think they're producing some fantastic players, and it's a very successful program. What's going on in the United States now is very, very important for the future of women's cricket. It's the second biggest cricket audience in the world. They've now got some exceptional people coaching those players, and we've been exposed to some of those players playing for us in games. There's a lot of work being done in Europe. There's some fantastic pieces coming out of Africa now as well, Africa proper. And certainly Southeast Asia is a very, very strong growth area for women's cricket. And you've already mentioned Thailand. So I think it's probably I've neglected to mention South America, where I know there's some very good things going on there with Argentina, for example. And I'm loath to I've obviously left out a number of people there. So I think it's probably just as important to talk about regions as it is to talk about individual countries. So overall, there's a lot of work being done, and I'm very optimistic about what the next 5 to 10 years look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for our viewers, I did want to add, we've done a feature piece with Veronica Vasquez, who's the captain of the Argentinian women's cricket team. So be sure to go on our website and take a look at that. I'm sure you'll get to read a little bit more about what's going on in women's cricket and cricket in general in Argentina. It's pretty interesting. Sean, I wanted to move on particularly back to Fair Break, and I know you spoke about it a little bit earlier on. But tell me a little bit about the cricketers involved with Fair Break. So, you mentioned a few players, but perhaps some of the more senior players, but also some of the players who most of the audience would not really expect to be playing the game, maybe because of the country that they're from.
Well, we've been very fortunate. I've mentioned Sanamir to you. Who needs no introduction, certainly to your listeners or viewers. Alex Blackwell, is obviously part of our organisation. Susie Bates has been wonderful in the contributions she's made. Shamilia Connell from the West Indies has been a part of what we do. Some players that you would have seen through Fair Break would be Selena Solomon, the captain of Vanuatu, who was actually the player of the game, player of the match in the first Wormsley fixture. Mariko Hill from Hong Kong. Shamila Moswayu, the Botswanan player. Again, examples of wonderful players that have been a part of what we do. We've had players from Oman, we've had players from Canada, Papua New Guinea at different times have been a part of programs that we've had. We've found some fantastic players in the United States. Jatika Kadali was playing in Bowral, 15 years of age, and outstanding product from North Carolina, which most of your viewers would not assume was a cricket stronghold. So they're just a few. I mean, but we've also had fantastic contributions made by players. Stephanie Fronmeyer from Germany. I can't not mention Stephanie. Gynecologist, past captain of the German team. And just to give you a little insight into how great it is to work with these players, last year when we played in England, Stephanie flew home on the spare weekend to deliver 4 babies before flying back to play against the MCC on the Monday. So that's the sort of environment that we're working in with these women. Outstanding.
Yeah, wow, that's I wouldn't personally know how to deal with all that pressure playing a cricket game and then heading over to the hospital. So credit to her, absolutely. Look, I think what I then want to ask is, if obviously you work with all these different athletes from around the world, why is it so important to Fair Break to promote but also highlight and provide opportunity to cricketers from countries where, coming back to the same thing, cricket's essentially an insect,
Well, it's just a vehicle that we use to work through the principles that we find important to us. And, it's arguably the second largest team game played by women around the world. And it's been the game that most of our management team has grown up with and has quite a passion for. So we've used it to advocate those principles around the world. And all of us believe that talent lies everywhere. It's not just in little pockets. So we need to expose that talent. We need to give it opportunity. And if we're talking about cricket being a global game, then we should be looking for it everywhere, not just in particular areas.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's, on the one hand, that's what you're working towards, and a lot of other people who work with you and in other spaces within cricket are trying to achieve and grow women's sport. And then, the pandemic comes along, and there's been a lot of discussion, and I think it's very clear that it will have an impact on these strides that have been made for women's cricket, women's sport in general, but in the context of cricket, right after the women's T20 World Cup, all that essentially success and promotion, and then the cricket's just gone. It's off the field for a significant time. How does, the current situation, in your opinion, impact women's cricket and, for example, growing it?
Well, we've already seen some funding removed from some women's programs around the world. I think it's a delicate balance at the moment, and I think everyone that's involved has to be very, very careful about where they place their priorities. We're in the middle of this pandemic, and it's far too early, in my view, to be making large-scale decisions around funding and games and what's possible and what isn't possible. So I think, hasten slowly would be my recommendation here. And I think, given the enormous gains there's been in women's cricket, now is not the time to decide that, well, that's the area that we can look at leveraging some savings or some cost cutting or whatever. I think that would be a huge mistake, given the momentum that's been built up and the phenomenal growth in the game, and it is phenomenal, and it needs to be maintained and carefully preserved.
Sure. And on the flip side, I guess, do you think, I've read a few opinion pieces in the media. I've read I've heard from a few people that if you look at it from the flip side, do you think there are any opportunities for women's cricket if hasty decisions aren't made, things are thought through? Do you think that there is the possibility for opportunities to come out of this situation for women's cricket?
I think the opportunity that I see is in going back to grassroots and domestic cricket. If it's impossible for us, for the short term at least, and maybe for the longer term, to travel internationally and to be playing internationally, then I think that funding that was there to do those things should go back into grassroots cricket and into developing some of the things that I mentioned earlier, the coaching and the management, the funding at a domestic level, but right from the very grassroots. So I think, rather than say, well, we can't play internationally, so we're not going to fund that, if those funds are available, then push them back down the line, back down to grassroots cricket, and grow that skill base there, and take the opportunity to work domestically with your players to strengthen and underpin what will eventually be something that blossoms when we can get on a plane and we can travel and we can play.
Absolutely. I think if the cards are played right from people perhaps such as yourself and people who are well ahead of where I'm sitting at the moment, there would be potentially a future that would enable growth and getting us back on track with the things that are going on. A couple of more questions, Sean, before we conclude our discussion, but very simple for our audience. If someone wants to get on and then support and promote the work that you're doing with Fairbreak, what do you need to do?
Well, it's easy to engage with us on all our social media channels. Certainly, you can contact us there. Do some homework on some of the players that I've mentioned and some of the players that feature on our website, on our social media. Get yourself involved in the women's game. All of those things would be ways that you can interact with us. Contact us through our website. We'll certainly get back to you if you've got an interest or you want to be involved with what we do. There's plenty of different ways to interact with what we're doing.
And for all the socials, Fairbreak socials and their website, just head down below. You'll find it there. If you're watching this on our website, we'll have it there as well. If you've come across this video on our socials, you'll find the Fairbreak socials there as well. So be sure to follow Fairbreak and have a look at what they're doing, as Sean suggested. Lastly, Sean, if you could summarize this for me, post-COVID-19 world, cricket's back, everything's happening in, a couple of sentences. What is the vision for the future of Fairbreak?
from our perspective, it's to continue doing what we're doing, to continue to build opportunity, to continue to create an environment where the diversity and inclusiveness of what we do carries across all areas. Remembering that we're at this point in time, we're using cricket as the vehicle to promote all of those areas that we like to develop. But the Fairbreak brand is not necessarily restricted to cricket. As I said, if you're a hashtag Fairbreaker, you're someone who supports equality and opportunity. And that's really our long-term, our short-term and our long-term focus with the work that we do.
Well, you heard it here, everyone. Like I said, be sure to follow Fairbreak, get onto their website, get in touch with them, help them out, support them how you can, share it with your friends. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on to the Sportageous videocast. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for the audience, I would like to say stay tuned for some more content, maybe in the form of articles that we'll be doing with Fairbreak. Just keep an eye out on what we're doing to get some more exciting and insightful content coming through. But once again, thank you, Sean. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.